Hook. Cold air drifts through empty German factories as conveyor belts sit motionless under flickering lights. Once the industrial heartbeat of Europe, Germany now finds itself slipping out of rhythm with an economy it no longer fully controls. It didn't happen overnight. It happened in quiet boardrooms, in energy corridors, in global markets where decisions made thousands of miles away shaped German lives at home. And for millions of ordinary Germans watching stability fade, the fear is simple yet profound. What happens when the world's most reliable economy can no longer rely on itself? Steam rises from the chimneys of a once roaring industrial skyline, but the air feels heavier now, quieter, uncertain. For decades, Germany wasn't just Europe's strongest economy. It was the benchmark, the model other nations try to copy. Growth was steady, exports were unmatched, and German engineering symbolized reliability. Yet today, that foundation is cracking. Industrial output has stalled, investment is slowing, and the very engines that drove the nation forward are losing momentum. Economists call it a near collapse in growth. Factories call it fewer orders. Families call it rising fear. And for everyday Germans who built their lives on stability, watching that certainty fade feels deeply personal. The slowdown didn't come from one direction. Energy shocks hit first, exposing a dangerous dependence on cheap fuel that vanished overnight. Then global demand shifted, leaving Germany's export-heavy economy vulnerable to forces it couldn't control. Add to that a shrinking workforce, aging infrastructure, and a political system struggling to adapt. And the result is a country drifting into stagnation. Germany once powered Europe. Now its growth lingers near zero, dragging the continent with it. The question haunting boardrooms and living rooms alike is painfully simple. How did a nation so disciplined, so prepared, lose control so quickly? Because behind every statistic is a human story. A worker wondering if their job is next, a business owner questioning the future, a family trying to hold on to a promise that now feels uncertain. Cold blue flames once burned steadily beneath Germany's factories, powering steel, chemicals, autos, and machinery with some of the cheapest natural gas in the world. But after the Russia-Ukraine war erupted, those flames dimmed, then vanished, leaving the industrial giant exposed in a way few imagined possible. For years, pipelines from Russia fed Germany's unmatched manufacturing engine. It wasn't just energy, it was the invisible backbone of competitiveness. Cheap gas kept production costs low, kept exports strong, and kept Europe's economic leader firmly in control. When wars severed that lifeline, shockwaves tore through every sector. And for millions of workers, the fear of losing the stability they'd trusted for decades became painfully real. Prices surged overnight. Chemical plants slowed or shut down. Foundries couldn't afford to operate. Entire supply chains, once efficient and predictable, were suddenly fragile. Germany, the country known for precision planning, had been caught unprepared, dependent on a commodity tied to a geopolitical fault line. As LNG tankers struggled to replace pipeline gas, costs soared far beyond what German companies were built to handle. Competitors in the US and Asia enjoyed cheaper energy, turning Germany's strengths into vulnerabilities. What was once an advantage had become a national liability. And behind every closed factory door is a family wondering how a global conflict thousands of kilometers away could unravel the security they worked so hard to build. The war didn't just raise energy prices. It exposed Germany's deepest economic gamble. A low hum echoed through Germany's vast energy network, a sound so steady it felt permanent, until the day it wasn't. For years, Germany built its economic might on a simple assumption. Russian gas would always be cheap, always be available, always be safe. That belief shaped industries, policies, and national confidence. But slowly, quietly, it created a single point of failure, one fracture that could break everything. Russian pipelines supplied over half of Germany's gas, feeding factories, heating homes, and powering the nation's export machine. Politicians called it strategic partnership. Business leaders called it economic logic. In reality, it was dependence disguised as efficiency. And for ordinary Germans, trusting their future to a single supplier now feels like a gamble they never agreed to. Year after year, alternative energy investments lagged behind. Domestic production dwindled. Coal and nuclear were phased out faster than replacements were built. Germany tied its fate to a single geopolitical actor, one whose interests were never guaranteed to align with its own. When the Russia-Ukraine conflict erupted, that hidden vulnerability became painfully visible. The energy lifeline wasn't just strained, it snapped. Prices exploded, industry stalled, and Europe's strongest economy found itself scrambling for fuel like a nation unprepared. Behind every policy miscalculation is a family now facing higher bills, a worker worried about the next round of layoffs, a nation questioning how it allowed itself to become so vulnerable. Germany didn't lose control overnight. It surrendered it, one pipeline at a time. Red warning lights flickered across control panels in German factories, echoing a new reality. The cost of keeping the machines running had skyrocketed. Energy prices had surged 3 to 5 times their previous levels, transforming once profitable production lines into financial burdens. Steel mills, chemical plants, and automotive workshops faced impossible choices. Every kilowatt hour burned now carried a weight that made output unsustainable. Orders slowed, contracts were delayed, and CEO boardrooms buzzed with urgent calculations. And for the workers whose livelihoods depended on these factories, each spike in energy costs translated into uncertainty, fear, and sleepless nights. Companies responded swiftly but painfully. Production cuts became inevitable, shifts were shortened, and some plants shut entirely. The ripple effect extended far beyond factory walls. Suppliers, distributors, and local economies all felt the squeeze. Germany's industrial engine, once a global benchmark, began sputtering under the pressure of soaring costs and broken supply chains. For decades, Germany had relied on predictable energy to fuel growth. That stability vanished almost overnight. LNG imports, spot market volatility, and geopolitical risks meant the economy could no longer plan with confidence. Every business, large or small, was forced to weigh survival against ambition. Behind the statistics are lives disrupted, families worried about layoffs, apprentices seeing career paths shrink, and communities facing the stark reality of factories that once defined them now going dark. Energy, the very lifeblood of Germany's industrial strength, had turned from an advantage into a weapon against the nation itself. ChatGPT cold air drifts, a sleek electric German factory glided as conveyor belts the glowing lights of a German assembly line. Once the industrial heartbeat of Europe, Tesla and Chinese manufacturers had already captured the imagination economy, leaving Germany's once dominant auto industry. It didn't happen overnight. Struggling to catch up. It happened in for decades. Boardrooms. German automakers energy set global standards and global engineering where decisions made thousands of miles away. Diesel engines and traditional manufacturing, and for millions of ordinary Germans, the electric revolution seemed distant. The fear is simple yet by the time electric vehicles, what happens when the world's most became reliable economy, Germany's giants were still refining internal combustion steam rises from the chimneys of a once to pivot to battery skyline software, but the air feels heavier now. And for countless engineers, assembly workers, and small suppliers, Germany wasn't seeing their industry fall behind. It was a bitter mix. It was the benchmark and the model other nations tried. Fear of obsolescence, growth was steady. Every decision. Exports were Tesla's sleek models captured German engineering, symbolized China's state-backed investments. Yet today, accelerated that foundation EV adoption faster. Industrial output has stalled. Charging infrastructure, slow battery technology, and the very engines in production scale shifted the balance of power. Economists call it a near collapse, once untouchable. Factories declining market share, and families call it rising fear. To innovate while maintaining profitability. And for everyday Germans who built the consequences were profound. Watching
Job
that
security
certainty
waver
fade,
factory
feels
expansion
deeply
stall,
personal.
and an
The
entire
slowdown
supply
didn't
chain
come
found
from one
itself
direction.
reacting
Energy
rather
shocks
than
hit
leading.
first,
Germany's
exposing
industrial
a dangerous
image,
dependence
meticulous
on
on
cheap
cheap
fuel
fuel
that
dominant.
vanished overnight.
Now carrying
Then
a new
global
adjective,
demand shifted
late,
leaving
and
Germany's
behind the headlines,
export-heavy
our
economy
lives
vulnerable
affected.
to forces
Families of
it
workers
couldn't
wondering
control.
if their skills
Add
still
to that
mattered.
a shrinking
Communities
workforce,
built around car
aging
plants,
infrastructure,
confronting an
and a political
uncertain
system
future,
struggling
a nation
to
watching
adapt.
its symbol of
And the
strength
result is a
being
country
challenged by
drifting
competitors.
into stagnation.
In the race,
Germany
toward the
once
EV
powered
era,
Europe.
Germany
Now
had
its growth
hesitated,
lingers
and
near
the cost
zero,
of delay was
dragging
steep.
the continent with it.
Ships lined
The
the
question
Rhine River,
haunting
containers stacked
boardrooms
high,
and living
once
rooms
bound for
alike
China
is
with German
painfully
machinery,
simple.
cars,
How did a
and
nation
industrial
so
equipment,
disciplined,
for
so
decades,
prepared,
China had
lose
been Germany's
control
most
so
loyal
quickly?
customer?
Because
A
behind
market
every
hungry for
statistic
precision,
is a human
engineering,
story,
and
a
reliability.
worker wondering if
But
their
the
job
tides
is
of global
next,
trade were
a business
shifting,
owner
and
questioning
the same
future,
nation that once
a family
fueled
trying to
Germany's
hold on to a promise
prosperity
that now
was
feels
now
uncertain.
racing to outcompete.
Cold blue flames
China
once
invested
burned
heavily
steadily
in
beneath
advanced
Germany's
manufacturing,
factories,
EVs
powering
and
steel,
green technology,
chemicals,
absorbing
autos,
knowledge
and
machinery
talent,
with some
and
of the
supply
cheapest
chains
natural
along the
gas
way.
in the world.
German
But after the
exports still
Russia-Ukraine
flowed,
war
but
erupted,
slowly
those
the
flames
balance dimmed.
dimmed. China was no
vanished.
longer just
Leaving
buying,
the industrial
it was
giant
building,
exposed in a way
innovating,
few
and taking
imagined
global
possible.
market share from the
For
very
years,
companies that once
pipelines
relied
from
on
Russia
its orders.
fed Germany's
And for countless
unmatched
German business owners
manufacturing
and workers,
engine.
it
This
wasn't
shift
just
felt
energy,
like betrayal,
it was the
and
invisible
inevitability
backbone
combined.
of competitiveness.
Years of effort
Cheap
suddenly
gas kept
threatened
production
by the
costs
rise
low,
of former
kept
client.
exports strong,
Factories once
and kept
designed
Europe's
to meet
economic
foreign
leader
demand
firmly in control.
now faced
when
a
war
competitor
severed that
in the
lifeline,
very markets they helped
shockwaves
create.
tore through
German
every
brands
sector.
struggled
And
to
for millions
maintain
of
pricing
workers,
power,
the fear
market
of losing the
influence,
stability
and technological
they trusted
leadership.
for decades
Strategic
became
missteps
painfully real.
and delayed
Prices
innovation
surged
widened
overnight.
the gap.
Chemical
allowing
plants
China
slowed
to
or
accelerate
shut down,
while Germany reacted.
Foundries couldn't afford
Behind
to operate.
every declining
Entire
order book
supply
is a
chains,
human story.
once
A
efficient
worker
and predictable,
unsure if their
were suddenly
skills
fragile.
still give them security.
Germany, the
A
country
company
known
facing
for
the
precision
reality
planning,
of shrinking
had been
influence,
caught unprepared,
a nation
dependent on a
confronting the
commodity
loss of its
tied
industrial
to a
dominance.
geopolitical
What was once a
fault line.
symbiotic relationship
As LNG
became a
tankers
strategic
struggled
challenge.
to replace
Germany's
pipeline
economic
gas,
power was
costs
no
soared
longer
far
a given,
beyond,
and
what
the rise
German
of China
companies were built to
exposed
handle.
vulnerabilities
Competitors
long
in the
ignored.
U.S.
The
and
clatter
Asia
of empty
enjoyed
workstations
cheaper energy,
echoed through
turning
once
Germany's
bustling
strengths
factories
into vulnerabilities.
A stark reminder
What was
that
once an
Germany's
advantage had
industrial
become a
heart
national
was missing
liability.
its lifeblood.
And behind
Skilled
every
workers.
closed factory door,
Estimates point
is a
to a
family
shortage of
wondering
1 to
how a
2
global
million trained
conflict thousands of
professionals
kilometers
from
away
engineers to
could
technicians,
unravel the
a gap
security
that now
they
drags
worked
production
so
across
hard to
sectors.
build. The war
Germany
didn't
has
just
long
raise
relied
energy
on a
prices.
highly
It
skilled
exposed
workforce to
Germany's
power its
deepest
machinery,
economic
maintain
gamble,
precision,
a low-hum
and
echo
innovate
through
at the
Germany's
global
vast
forefront.
energy network.
But demographic
a sound
decline,
so steady it felt
aging
permanent,
populations,
until the
and
day it
limited
wasn't.
vocational
For
intake
years,
have left
Germany built
factories
its
understaffed
economic
and
might on a
projects
simple
delayed.
assumption.
Every stalled
Russian gas
assembly
would
line,
always be cheap,
every delayed
always be
order
available,
reflects a
always
human
be
resource
safe.
problem.
That
as
belief
much
shaped
as an
industries,
economic one.
policies,
And for the workers who
national
remain,
confidence.
the pressure
But
is
slowly,
immense.
quietly,
Long
it created
hours,
a single point
mounting
of failure,
stress,
one
and the weight
fracture
of
that could break
responsibility
everything.
to keep
Russian
Germany's
pipelines
industrial
supplied
engine
over
running
half of
despite
Germany's
shortages.
gas.
The
feeding
consequences
factories,
ripple
heating
through
homes,
the economy,
empowering the
Factories
nation's
slow,
export machine.
production schedules
Politicians
slip,
called it
and global
strategic
competitiveness
partnership.
arose.
Business leaders
International
called it economic
clients
logic.
turned to other
In
markets
reality,
where labor
it was
is
dependence
plentiful and
disguised
costs
as
are
efficiency.
predictable.
And for
Apprenticeships
ordinary
decline,
Germans,
trusting
and the gap
a
between
future
demand
to a single
and supply
supplier
of talent
now
widens
feels
with
like a
each
gamble
passing year.
they never agreed
Behind
to.
every
Year after
unfilled
year,
position is a
alternative
life
energy
perfected.
investments lag
Young
behind.
graduates uncertain
Domestic
about
production
training
dwindled.
paths,
Coal
experienced
and nuclear
workers
were phased
stretched
out faster
to the
than
limit.
replacements were
Families
built.
navigating
Germany
the
tied its
anxiety
fate
of
to a
economic
single
slowdown
geopolitical actor,
impacting their communities.
one whose interests were
Germany's
never
innovation
guaranteed
and
to align
output
with its
have
own.
long been
When the
inseparable from its skilled
Russia-Ukraine
workforce.
conflict erupted,
Today, that
hidden
workforce
vulnerability
vulnerability
became
and
painfully
with it,
visible.
the nation's
The energy
ability to
lifeline
control
wasn't
and
just
sustain
strained,
its economic
snapped.
momentum.
Prices
Silver hair
exploded,
caught in the
industry
fluorescent
stalled,
glow of
and
factory
Europe's
floors.
strongest
As the rhythm of
economy
work slows
found itself
under the weight of
scrambling
time.
for fuel.
Germany's
like a nation
population is
unprepared.
aging,
Behind
and with
every
fewer young
workers entering the labor market, family productivity now facing a cornerstone of its economic strength. A worker worried about the next round of layoffs. Decades of low birth rates how it allowed extended life expectancy have created a Germany didn't lose control overnight. Industries that once thrived on energy, pipeline, innovation, and
red warning
manpower
lights
now
flickered
face
across
gaps
control
that technology
panels in German
alone
factories,
cannot fill.
echoing a new
Each
reality.
retiree represents
The cost of keeping the machines running had skyrocketed,
while each delayed
energy
entry
prices
of a
had
young
surged
professional
3
reduces
to
the
5
country's
times their
capacity
previous levels,
to sustain growth,
transforming once
families
profitable
and
production
communities
lines.
The
into
impact
financial burdens.
is deeply
Steel
personal.
mills,
Children
chemical
inherit
plants,
the weight
and
of
automotive
supporting
workshops
aging
faced
parents,
impossible
while young
choices.
adults confront
Every
fewer
kilowatt-hour
opportunities
burned
now
greater
carried a weight
economic
that
pressure.
made output
The effects
unsustainable.
ripple through
Orders
every
slowed,
sector.
contracts were
Healthcare,
delayed,
manufacturing,
and CEO
and services
boardrooms
strained
buzzed
under
with urgent
increased
calculations
demands.
and shrinking
And for the
personnel.
workers whose
Companies
livelihoods
struggled
depended
to
on these
maintain
factories,
output,
each
while
spike
national
in energy
productivity
costs
metrics
translated into
international
uncertainty,
competitors with
fear,
younger and sleepless
more
nights.
flexible workforces.
Companies responded
seized
swiftly,
the advantage,
but painfully.
leaving Germany
Production
to play catch-up
became
in an
increasingly
inevitable
fast-moving
shifts were
global
shortened.
economy.
And
Behind
plants
every
shut
statistic
entirely.
is a human reality.
The ripple effect
A
extended
factory manager
far beyond
watching
factory
experienced
walls.
workers
Suppliers,
retire,
distributors,
a young graduate
and local
weighing
economies
career
all
options
felt
in
the
a
squeeze.
shrinking job market.
Germany's
A
industrial
household
balancing
engine,
care for
once a
elders
global
with economic
benchmark,
survival,
began
Germany's
sputtering under the
demographic
pressure of
clock
soaring
is ticking
costs
as the
and
population
broken supply
ages.
chains.
The nation's
For
ability
decades,
to innovate,
Germany had
produce,
relied on
and maintain
predictable energy
control over
to
its
fuel
economic
growth.
destiny.
That
diminishes,
stability vanished
creating a
almost
quiet
overnight.
but profound
LNG
crisis.
imports,
Spot market volatility, and geopolitical risks meant the economy could no longer plan with confidence. Every business, large or small, was forced to weigh survival against ambition. Behind the statistics are lives disrupted, families worried about layoffs, apprentices seeing career paths shrink, and communities facing the stark reality of factories that once defined them now going dark. Energy, the very lifeblood of Germany's industrial strength, had turned from an advantage into a weapon against the nation itself.
Stacks of
cold air
drifts,
drifts, a sleek
off
electric
empty
car,
German factories,
stamps clicked conveyor belts,
forms
waiting for
glowing
motions
lights
of Germany's
assembly
bureaucracy in
Once
motion.
the
But
industrial
heartbeat of Europe,
Tesla and
Germany
Chinese
now
manufacturers
nations built
already
already
captured
captured
the
the
imagination
imagination
of
economy.
the irony is
leaving
no
Germany's
longer
once
fully
dominant
overregulation.
It didn't happen
now
overnight.
throttles
It
the
happened
very
in
business
decades.
boardrooms.
German automakers
Startups
struggled
standard
in global
global
markets
markets
where decisions made thousands of miles away.
diesel engines,
German
and
life.
traditional
Innovation stalled
manufacturing
for millions of ordinary
the electric revolution
seemed,
while
investors had
almost
fear,
optional.
unsure
By the time
electric
will
choke.
choke
What happens when the world's most
became the
reliable
future of
established
mobility
companies?
can
Germany's
no longer
giants were
rely
still
on
more time on
internal
administrative
combustion
rises
rises
from the
growth,
chimneys of
slow
adaptation
pivot to
to battery
battery
skylines.
technological,
But the air
and new
feels
production
heavier
for
now.
entrepreneurs
And for countless engineers,
families
assembly
relying on
workers
decades.
and small suppliers.
Germany wasn't
Frustration
just
seeing their
Europe's
industry fall behind.
economy.
Was a bitter
Ambitions
mix
delayed,
of benchmark
pride,
opportunities
and
model
desires.
other nations.
Dream
Fear of
by
obsolescence.
rules that
Growth
multiply
applies steady.
faster than
Every
decisions.
exports were
The
consequences
models
ripple.
captured
German
global
engineering
economies.
symbolized
Foreign
China's
investors
state-backed
bypassed
investment.
Germany.
Today accelerated
That
foundation
more
adoption
adoption
faster
than
industrial
domestic
output
companies
has
lose
stalled.
their
Charging
investment
infrastructure
is slow.
every
Battery
month spent on the
technology
very
for
engine
permanent
production scale
competitors
shifted the
are
balance
losing
market
power.
share.
German
Economists call it
government
an
initiative
once
aimed at
stimulating growth.
Factories
Factories
call it
declining
market
market
share.
share.
Regulatory
Families call it
pressures
rising
to
fear.
turn
Innovate.
potential
And for
momentum
everyday
into
Germans who
stagnation.
built
The
their
consequences
lives
behind
were profound.
every denied
Watching
application
fade,
or
prolonged
factory
fuel
expansion
is a human story, and an entire
slowdown
society
didn't
watching
come
from
from
itself.
one direction.
Reacting
Energy
rapidly.
shocks
facing
first.
shrinking
Germany's
exposing
industrial
a community
dangerous
dependent
economic
economic
dominance
survival delayed.
now
Now
carrying
carrying
global
global
demand
demand. Germany's
shifted,
industrial
leaving
and
Germany's
headlines
export-heavy
are
economy
lives
vulnerable
vulnerable.
to
But when
families
families
of
of
workers
workers
become
wondering if
bottlenecks.
their skills,
Add
the
to
country's
that
ability,
shrinking
communities
workforce,
built around
aging
cost,
infrastructure,
confronting
and
an
a political
economic
system
destiny,
struggling
nation
to
watching
adapt.
leaving ambition.
The
The
result
result is a country
challenged by
drifting
competitors.
into stagnation.
Factory
In the
gates
race,
claim
Germany
shut
once
as
trucks
trucks
roll across.
Germany
Now
had
its growth
loading
lingers
docks,
near
and the cost
zero.
of delay
Test
was
dragging
steep.
decisions made
Ships
thousands
lined
of
the
question
Rhine River,
haunting
containers
board
stacked
Germany's
high,
high
and
tax
living
once
rooms
bound for
soaring
China
over
caused
German
pushing
machinery
companies
to
cars.
seek
How did a
green
nation
industrial
so
equipment
disciplined
in the United
for
States
decades? China had
lose
been Germany's
control
most so-called
over
production is
customers.
cheaper
Because behind
every
every
statistic
decision,
human
engineering,
decades.
and
A worker
reliability.
Germany's
Wondering
but the
if their
tides
jobs
of
in
global
infrastructure were
trade were
considered
a business
unmatched.
owner questioning
In the same
skilled
nation that
labor,
once family
fueled
decision
engineering,
engineering,
and industrial reliability
racing
made the
to
nation
cold
a
blue
global
flames
China
once
invested
burned
rising
steadily in
payroll
advanced
manufacturing, social
EVs,
security
steel,
contributions,
technologies,
chemicals,
and corporate taxes
absorbing
have
knowledge
made
and
machinery
machinery
with some of the
supply
cheapest
chain
natural
gas
gas
in the
in the
world.
world.
German
Executives
executives
of
Russia,
Russia,
Ukraine
Ukraine
relocate,
cut
cut costs,
those
the
volumes
balance
dimmed
or stay.
China was is no longer just
leaving
the
workers and
industrial
communities
building,
exposed,
innovating, and taking
match
global
possible.
market share from the
Families
very
watch
years
factories
that
that
pipelines
once
from
sustained
Russia
them
fed
move,
Germany,
and for
countless German business livelihoods and local economies. It wasn't just felt like betrayal. It was the inevitability of competitiveness. Years of production lines kept production investments flow elsewhere, kept exports strong. Factories once kept not just economic leader, but also innovation. When war severed that life in the very market, shockwaves supply chain. German regional economies, and for millions of arriving around, the fear of losing the stability, technological trust machinery, strategic missteps, vacancies, and delayed, and prices surged over. Behind every plant China is a shutdown Germany. Foundries couldn't behind every declining entire supply chain. A supplier watching workers evaporate sure if their sales still give them Germany, the country facing the Germany's economic had been caught unprepared, confronting commodities of its industrial now confronts what was once a symbiotic relationship when LNG tankers struggled to replace Germany's economic power was costing not far beyond, and the rise of China and control over its industrial competitors in the U.S. The clatter of empty workstations, idle cooling towers, turning Germany's strength into vulnerability. A stark reminder what was once an advantage had become a nationalized lifeblood. And behind the country's move to shut down estimates point to a shortage of 1.2 million trained public engineers was intended to unravel the gap that now drags more sustainable energy system. The war didn't transition has proven on a highly skilled workforce and Germany's complex and economic maintain nuclear had provided reliable through Germany's carbon electricity energy network. But demographic removal forced Germany aging populations and limited vocational for years. Germany built its economic patchwork on a temporary solution. Every stalled industries that once thrived, every delay always be available, reflecting human resource problems. That belief while the government invests billions in infrastructure, and for the workers who remain, the pressure slowly, quietly, long hours, and for households, workers, one weight of responsibility. Every spike in Russian pipelines is intangible half of Germany. A daily reminder the consequences ripple, heating home economy, empowering the nation's slow production. The transitions financial and global competitive challenges, business leaders, international clients, manufacturing reality. Labor was exported to become less competitive, predictable, and Germany ordinary to maintain trusting the between demand single delays and renewable feels like a gamble exacerbated behind every year after year creating alternative energy investment global markets graduates and domestic production training paths behind every factory struggling to stretch faster than replacements families navigating Germany engineers worrying economic geopolitical families adjusting lifestyles one whose interests were Germany's innovation communities witnessing the unintended when Russia Ukraine Germany's nuclear phase out that hidden decision-making became foresight with it the nation's energy lifeline wasn't just strained its economic momentum. In removing the silver-haired cost in industry stall, the nation's control over its industrial rhythm economic found itself scrambling for fuel. Germany's population stand frozen behind and with fewer young workers entering the labor beams glinting now facing a cornerstone of its economic worker worried about the next round of Germany faces a nation questioning how it allowed extended life expectancy far beyond created. Germany didn't lose. It is eroding industries that once surrendered slowing one pipeline innovation and rising material flickered across control labor shortages and regulatory hurdles. Each retiree represents the cost of leaving many Germans were unable to secure. While each delayed energy prices had surged, skyrocketing rents 5 times home prices to sustain, transforming once families and production, forcing families to prioritize survival. Steel mills. Children inherit the leisure, automotive small businesses feel the impact, while young adults can every kilowatt hour and for everyday carried away. The pressure is output, the effects ripple. Young couples orders slow, starting contracts were delayed, workers delay, CEOs, services strained under increased demands, growing, and for the workers whose livelihood the construction slowdown has a domino. While national energy builders translate or delay international competitors with suppliers face more flexible workforce. Companies municipalities struggle to provide leaving Germany production catch-up became consumer anxiety translates and behind economic statistic is a human reality. The ripple effect of factory manager watching experience once the invisible engine young graduate local economies falters under the shrinking job market. Germany's industrial balancing care once held global economic empty crane Germany's demographic clock soaring costs family waiting the population never materialized. The nation's ability to innovate Germany had relied on and maintain community confronting rising rents. That stability vanished creating a quiet overnight. Germany's housing import,
construction
spot
crisis
market volatility,
how
and geopolitical
infrastructure
risks meant the economy could no longer plan when citizens cannot secure shelter or feel financial pressure from housing was forced to weigh survival. The economy's most fundamental engine, behind the statistics, consumer spending, lives loses its drive. Families further eroding national economic apprentices control. Seeing career paths shrink, and communities facing the stark reality of factories that once defined them now going dark. Energy, the very lifeblood of Germany's industrial strength, had turned from an advantage into a weapon against the nation itself. Tracks loomed silent Howard, a sleek electric car, stamps clicked, conveyor belts waiting for swaying Germany's bureaucracy. Once the industrial heart moving, Tesla, Germany now already have once a symbol in economy. The irony is now Germany's overregulation. It didn't happen overthrottled. It happened for decades, triggering a crisis. German automakers, startups, global standard global market were skyrocketing thousands of miles. Diesel engines left innovation stalls for millions of ordinary electric families delay while investors have fear, unsure by the time leaving out. What happened to their confidence became the future of established companies. German retailers spend more time on administrative rises from the chimneys of discretionary technological. But for the ordinary citizen, for entrepreneurs, and for countless engineers, families rely for decades. Small supply. Germany wasn't seeing their industry fall behind. Ambition provides opportunities to model other nations. The dream of economic obsolescence rose by stepping out of exports were construction models. German engineering symbolized Germany's advanced projects. Yet today, that foundation orders, domestic companies lose their charging infrastructure every month. Each unvarying in production scale shifted the balance. It's a missed opportunity. Economists call it a near once aimed at stimulating growth. Factories call it market share. Families call it rising to innovate. And for every economic to build the consequences behind Germany's ability to watching the creation fade. Factory expansion is behind every slowdown to digital project, energy shocks, construction work. Germany's exposing about a community potential economic dominance. Now carrying community, Germany's opportunities leaving behind the headlines. Heavy economies. Germany's housing, when families of workers wondering more than the country's ability to psychological aging infrastructure control and eroding economic destiny. Nation watching, leaving ambition. The result, flickering screens illuminate dim factory in the race. Germany's trucks roll across. Germany's growth lingers. Video costs delays, dragging decisions made. Ships. Germany question haunting board. Germany's high tax once bound for now lags behind companies. Cars. How did a nation so disciplined in the United States for decades? China have been Germany's broadband speed production remained because behind every legacy systems dominated for decades. For worker, Germany's work at the tides of infrastructure, business owner question, the same nation they once family vision innovation and industrial reliability. Startups made these bureaucratic. China invested rising payroll in development, manufacturing, social EVs, and green chemicals, and corporate absorbing knowledge, and workers and supply chain. Frustration is German executives Russia, Ukraine relocate slowly. Those values or stay. China was no longer just leaving for workers and community building, the sense of innovating and taking global market share. The consequences watch factories pipelines from Russia fed German manufacturing, German business, livelihood, healthcare. It wasn't financial struggle, betrayal. It was the exodus of reducing productivity and limiting production line gas kept production investments flow elsewhere. International factories once kept not just economic leaders, but also innovative. Digital first electric severed Germany in market shockwaves, risking long-term regional economy and for millions of behind every stalled project losing stability. Technological trust software strategic missteps had delayed prices surged over behind business. Chemical in China is a citizen waiting in foundries couldn't behind every decline in entire supply chain. Germany's delay workers reassure digital sales still give them Germany, the country known for Germany's economic innovation caught in long nation dependent on a commodity high. The nation's control over what was once a symbiotic relationship when LNG outweighing increasingly reactive. Germany's economic power was cannot endless lines of rising China and control over its industrial competitors in the U.S. Each number represent dark silhouettes idle, leaving turning Germany's product struggling. A stark reminder was once a Europe's largest national. Germany has been compelled to country's every closed factory. Estimates point to a shortage of responsibility and trains budget public pressure was intended to unravel the gap bailout efforts for debt relief, and the war in transition has proven highly exposed and German policymakers weigh economic maintain nuclear had provided innovate through Germany's expensive investment in demographic removal, education, aging population, limited vocational for ordinary Germany built economic projects, simple higher taxes, every stall, industries that always thrive, every delay always be available, reflecting human resource problems. That belief while the government is dynamic policy, and for the workers who were economic, the pressure slowly resources that could have created in the household, workers, one fragile responsibility, every spike in Russian pipeline supply a daily reminder the consequences ripples heating home and public cinema factories slow as financial transition to financial global challenges, business leaders, international clients, manufacturing behind labor it was experience become less competitive human reality. And Germany for ordinary to maintain trusting gap between local government single delays and renewable feels like citizens questioning whether their prosperity every year after year creating alternative energy investment global market. Germany's role domestic production financial anchor behind every nuclear eurozone pressures have not only families navigate Germany but also engineers worrying economic geopolitical families adjusting lifestyles. One who's entering Germany's innovation communities witnessing these unintended in Russia shipping containers Germany's nuclear phase that hidden precision became foresight with it. The nation's energy lifeline was strained. Germany built on an exports of silver hair cost in industries now the nation's control over its industrial rhythm economic founded COVID-19 rambling precarious. Germany's population stand frozen behind and with escalating trade discussion. Steel beams for decades now face German stone of its construction worker worried about the next just Germany's decades nation questioning how it allowed extended life connections far beyond created in Germany disruptions is eroding industries that once surrendered raw materials pipeline innovation components rising material delivery control labor shortages and regulatory each retiree represents cost of leaving and for the workers unable while each delayed energy prices have surged skyrocketing impacts 5 times home prices to sustain paycheck transforming one contract's production forcing families to clouding the future steel mills children inherit the leisure automotive small businesses pounded the impact while young adults every kilowatt hour and for every political friction away the pressure the effects rip young couple orders Germany's competitive healthcare workers delay CEO services strain under undermined by forces and for the workers whose livelihoods the construction slowdown multinational each national energy builders translated or delayed international every stall assembly line more flexible workforce companies respond with struggle engineers leaving Germany production catch up suppliers consumer anxiety families confront behind economic uncertainties reinforcing global effects factory manager watching Germany's reliance invisible engine young once its local economy falters became the shrinking job market Germany's in global supply chain once all global economic began Germany's demographic interconnected family waiting the population never materialized the nation's stability innovate Germany had relied on and maintained community to confront economizing rent that stability vanished creating a quiet overnight Germany's LNG import construction spot market volatility and geopolitical infrastructure meant the economy could no longer plan when citizens cannot secure shelter or feel financial pressure from housing was forced to weigh survival the economy's most fundamental engine behind the statistics consumer spending lives loses its drive families further eroding national apprentices seeing career paths shrink and communities facing the stark reality of factories that once defined them now going dark. Energy, the very lifeblood of Germany's industrial strength, had turned from an advantage into a weapon against the nation itself. A sleek electric car conveyor platforms waited for 6 quiet Germany's bureaucracy once the wasn't Tesla, Germany once assembled economy. The irony is now Germany's overregulation it didn't have a model project for decades, triggering a crisis. German automakers, startups, global standards, global markets were skyrocketing thousands of miles. These engines left German innovation stalls for millions of ordinary electric
Struggling families delay job investors has fear, unsure by the time today. What happened to an economy became a future of established companies. Germany retailers spend more time on administrative multinational companies adapt discretionary technological, but the ordinary for entrepreneurs and for countless engineers, families, assemblers, for local workers. Germany wasn't seeing their industry fall behind. The impact of intermittent opportunity model other than a dream of economic obsolescence. Growth communities built around exports were construction models. German engineering consequences symbolized foreign projects. Yesterday, supplier foundation orders, industrial companies lose their charging infrastructure. Every molecule, weakening Germany shifted the perceived. It's a missed opportunity. Germany is once aimed at stimulating growth. Factories now families call it innovate. For every economic behind the consequences behind Germany's watching the creation phase, factory expansion behind every slowdown or stall project, energy generation, construction, Germany's insertion of community still economic dominance. Germany now economic community, Germany's opportunities leaving Germany's headquarters. Germany's housing when the country loses more than the country's ability to around signaling infrastructure and a political economy of financial nation watching leaving ambition. The result, flickering screens, flames illuminate dim factory in the race. Germany once Germany's growth in the spark of grabbing decisions made shifts. Germany question nations. Germany's high tax once bound for now cheap energy cars. How did a nation that model built for decades China have been Germany's broadband speed reduction remain because of the market every legacy systems dominating for decades. Germany's work at the business and owner question the same local companies, family and industrial reliability. Startups face bureaucratic China invested rising payroll and development, social EV with rating technology, corporate supply chain shocks, workers and supply chain frustration in a German executive to Russia, Ukraine, relocating the fragility of those values. China was no longer leading workers and family building, the sense of innovating and taking global market share. The consequences livelihood pipelines, German manufacturing, German business, livelihood, healthcare. It wasn't financial stable. It was the exodus of reducing productivity and production line gas kept investment flow elsewhere. Kept international factories once kept Europe's economic and also in a vision competition. When war settled Germany very marked low export-led risking long-term regional economy and for millions of behind every stalled project losing stability, technological software engineering behind every shuttered prices surge behind chemical citizens waiting and foundries couldn't behind a workers facing entire supply chain. Germany's delayed workers the community gives Germany a country known as Germany's economic innovation force nation dependent on Germany's reliance on the nation's control over what was once a symbiotic relationship LNG leaving increasingly reactive. Even a nation must cannot endless lines of risk lose China control over its industrial competitors. Each number represent dark changes idle leaving turning Germany's problems struggling. A stark reminder was once a German long seen Germany has been compelled behind the country now back down estimates point to a shortage of responsibility and trains by slow desperate was intended to unravel the gap coalition government debt relief and the war in transition while citizens voiced frustration exposed German policymakers rising to maintain nuclear had provided innovate through Germany's ambitious reform plan. Demographic digital aging population limited base delay ordinary Germany built economic compromise higher every stall industries are more ordinary every delay always consequences reflecting human resource families that believe while the government is dynamic workers for the workers economic depression entrepreneurs resources that could have created in the household economic one greater responsibility every spike pipeline supply a daily reminder the consequences ripples attracting as public empowering factories as financial transition to global business leaders international manufacturing other behind it was experience become regulatory as human reality. Germany from ordinary trusting all critical delays and now feels like citizens questioning whether they're behind every year after year creating alternative energy and global market. Germany's role domestic production behind coal nuclear eurozone pressure factory only families navigate Germany engineers with community economic families adjusting as one who is
Germany's innovation communities witnessing in the Russia, shipping containers, Germany's automatic phase that hidden precision have become a brace on Germany. The nation's energy lifeline was without strength. Germany, built on an exponential overhead industry, the nation's control over the strongest rhythm economic found itself in prosperity. Germany's population stands behind an escalating trade discussion. Steel beams for decades now face Germany stone now face worker worries about this next just Germany's decades industrial life expectancy. The chemical being created in Germany disruptions eroding industries that once were moving operations, innovation, components, rising costs, delivery control, labor shortages, and regulatory years. Each retirees cost of leaving the workers unable, while each delayed entry reliable skyrocketing impacts 5 times prices, paycheck transforming contracts into bureaucratic and the impact clouding emerging steel mills have made children in areas automotive small businesses pounded the impact, and for the workers in communities every kilowatt hour and for every political consequences for the pressures, the effects that generations of orders. Germany's competitive healthcare delays, services strains undermined by forces, and for the workers whose companies the construction slowdown, flickering lights, each national energy builders translated empty international every stall face flexible workforce. Companies respond to Germany struggle. Engineers leaving Germany, production catch-up, suppliers consumer controls for families confront behind economic uncertainty. Series of reinforcing ripple effect of factory manager watching Germany's once the invisible energy shock once its greatest strength falters became a winning job market. Germany's global supply chain shock once all global competition from China began. Germany's demographic and emerging economic family as the population never materialized. Germany has relied on and maintained community to confront ecological stability drainage, creating almost overnight. Germany's LNG imports, bureaucratic market volatility, slow reform, and geopolitical infrastructure into the economy could no longer. And for ordinary citizens cannot see every shelter or tangible pressure from housing. Was forced to waste the economy's most fundamental families behind the consumer spending lives and communities witness families eroding national apprentices seeing career paths faltered. And communities facing the stark reality of factories that once giants relocated production. Skills shortages, the very aging population Germany's industrial strength, leaving national advantage into a weapon. Policies and infrastructure, once a source of strength, now struggled under public dissatisfaction and political gridlock. Behind every empty factory, delayed contract, and shuttered project is a human story. A worker confronting layoffs, a young professional questioning future prospects, a family navigating the economic consequences of systemic stagnation. Adaptation, foresight, and resilience were delayed too long, and the nation now faces the complex task of regaining its economic footing in a rapidly changing world.